Yorana, kia ora, talofa, bula, guten Morgen, willkommen, welcome everyone. My name is Lars Eckstein. I'm a professor of literatures and cultures at the University of Potsdam. This is my colleague Anja Schwarz, professor of British cultures, also at the University of Potsdam, and together with Mimi George from Hawaii, anthropologist and sailor, we have jointly organized the Te Ara Vaka Moana conference. It's great to see so many of you here. We did not know what to expect. This is a conference not requiring registration. It's open to the public and one never knows who will come. And it's amazing to see that there's an interest in Oceania here in Berlin. The Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean on the planet. Here in Europe, it's of course far away, and many of us have a fairly distorted idea of its proportions. This has to do with the fact that in our atlases and in our children's books and school books, Oceania tends to be utterly marginalized. On our conventional world maps, as you see them here, it is squeezed left and right of the land masses to the east, west, and south of Europe. Using a so-called Mercator projection, these maps not only dwarf those regions of the planet that are close to the equator and exaggerate beyond proportion regions that are close to the poles, they also cut Oceania right through the middle. It merits taking a step back, therefore, and taking a look at Oceania from space to become aware of the majestic size of the Pacific Ocean that covers more than a third of the Earth's surface. The way we look at things and the way we organize the world in representational models makes all the difference. Europeans have only been able to cross this ocean on ships from the 16th century onwards. Wherever they chanced upon in their crossings, they did not find a single archipelago uninhabited. What is more, Europeans at the time were notoriously bad at finding places in the Pacific again that they had seen before. This has to do with the fact that up until a little earlier than 1800, they had the greatest difficulty to establish where they were in terms of longitude, that is, in terms of where they were according to their east-west position. To give you just one example, when the Spaniard Álvaro de Mendaña crossed Oceania on the trade winds from Latin America, from the west to the east in the late 16th century, and hit the Marquesan Islands, he thought at first he'd made it all the way to the Philippines. That's how bad they were. By that time, the peoples of Oceania had long explored the region at large and had been capable for centuries, in some regions for millennia, to target even the most remote islands in targeted exploration voyages and in voyaging networks that maintained ties of kinship and trade. Some of these networks, such as those between Central Polynesia and the remote corners of the Polynesian Triangle, that is Rapa Nui, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Hawaii, were no longer traveled by the time of European contact, at least as best as we know. Most others were flourishing. How Oceanian peoples had managed to settle the largest ocean of the planet was a mystery to observers for the longest time, Western observers. How could a people without iron, and more importantly, without physical maps or instruments, have succeeded in something Europeans were only beginning to learn in the Enlightenment period? Captain James Cook, the famous British navigator, is, to the best of our knowledge, the first European to have understood the fundamental principles of Oceanian settlement. He wrote in his journal in 1769, I quote, "In these prose, or pahis as they call them in Tahiti, from all accounts we can learn, these people sail in those seas from island to island for several hundred leagues, the sun serving them for a compass by day and the moon and stars by night. When this comes to be proved," Europeans always want empirical proof, "we shall no longer be at a loss to know how the islands lying in those seas came to be peopled. We may trace them from island to island, quite to the East Indias, that is to Southeast Asia," unquote. In other words, Cook understood that Oceania was settled step by step against the trade winds from the west to the east. Now, he didn't learn this by himself, but he had a source, and that source was the Raiatian Tahua and master navigator he met in Tahiti and who joined his crew there, a man called Tupaia, about whom Anya and I will speak at much length tomorrow. However, the longer the colonization of Oceania continued, the less Europeans listened to Oceanian scholars and knowledge holders and navigators. Over time, Western sciences became convinced that for peoples without iron maps or instruments, it would have been impossible to settle the largest ocean of the planet in purposeful and targeted voyages against the winds. All sorts of theories were brought forth about accidental settlement, random displacements by currents and storms, and especially in drift voyages. The perhaps best known example of such theorizing and experimental testing is Thor Heyerdahl, who is ironically still much better known in our parts of the world than any Oceanian master navigator. His own drift voyage from the Latin American continent to the Tuamotus was not only his attempt to prove that Oceania, and especially Polynesia, was settled from Latin America, which is evidently wrong. It was also to prove a very crude racist theory about the presumably Aryan origin of Polynesian peoples descending from the Vikings. Now, starting probably earlier, as Mimi will tell us in a moment, but with a vengeance in the 1960s, not only Western scholars began to refute these theories and to credit the knowledge traditions of Oceanian peoples, especially Oceanian scholars and practitioners themselves reactivated ancestral knowledge, traditions, and conducted long-distance experimental voyaging again across Oceania. This voyaging revival has not only proven generations of Western scholarship wrong and exposed their Eurocentric arrogance, it has also opened entirely new perspectives for the future that makes Oceanian communities less dependent on colonial and neo-colonial structures. It reactivated voyaging networks and patterns of relation across different regions. And not least, it has offered models for a sustainable mobility that is independent on fossil fuels and other resource extractions. We'll hear more about the voyaging revival in detail in a few minutes from our esteemed co-organizer, Mimi George.
Before we go there, however, we feel we need to acknowledge this place from which we speak and where this conference is held here in Berlin, the Humboldt Forum. We have to admit, as organizers, we feel ambivalent, at least, about doing this conference, this with you in this space. Like so many people in the city, we find the Humboldt Forum behind its reconstructed Prussian facades a difficult institution to live with. We take issue with a rather celebratory approach to Prussia and its ultimately imperialist history that is embodied in this architecture. We deplore the long neglect of proactive and systematic provenance research by German collecting institutions, some of whose collections are now on display here. Like many others, we insist on the recognition of the foundational violence of colonialism that underlies the majority of ethnographic holdings in Europe. Yet, not to engage with this space, not to engage with the Humboldt Forum, we believe is not an option either. Through our own work that Lars mentioned and that we'll share tomorrow, our own work on traditional navigational knowledge in the Society Islands, we feel a particular obligation to our colleagues and friends in Oceania, whose cultural, spiritual, and economic inheritance is housed here. Organizing this event with them and hosting it here has been a lesson for us, a lesson in how to learn to live with the Humboldt Forum and the attempt to do justice to some of the most prestigious artifacts it holds. First and foremost, the waka or wa'a, the ancestral sailing vessels on display and the famous Boots Kubus. We are grateful to Dorothea Deters from the Ethnologisches Museum, who has supported our proposal for this conference and this meeting, this trip from the outset, and to the Stiftung Humboldt Forum, which is hosting us here today in its own castle. Thank you for having us.
This being said, it's absolutely vital for a conference co-organized by two German scholars and hosted by an institution like the Humboldt Forum to acknowledge the legacies of German colonialism in Oceania. While the German public, partly through the nationwide debates triggered by the plans for and the realization of the Humboldt Forum, has become aware and critically discusses the German colonial engagements on the African continent in particular, most Germans, at least in my view, are to this day unaware of the German engagements in the Pacific. Germany's formal control of Oceanian colonies began, as for all German colonies, with the Bismarck Conference held here in Berlin between 1884 and 1885. And like for all other colonies, it formally ended with the commencement of the First World War in 1914. The vast majority, at least to my knowledge, of the Oceanian artifacts on display in the exhibition spaces in this very house, as well as in the storage facilities out in Dahlem at the former Ethnologisches Museum, have left Oceania during this period. Now, there's not a lot of history written by Germans about the formal colonization of Oceanian territories, which included German Samoa, Northeast Papua New Guinea and the Bismarck Archipelago, the Solomon Islands Protectorate, but for instance also Nauru, Palau, and Micronesian archipelagos in the Northern Marianas, the Carolines, and the Marshall Islands. There is a dominant narrative out there, partly also shared by the German government, that German colonial interests in the Pacific were, unlike those of rival imperial powers such as the British or the French, more scientific and even more philanthropic, based on select readings of some of the governors in Samoa and Papua New Guinea in particular. Now, we emphatically reject that narrative. It's important to stress that the German colonial perspective was, like all other empires, a geostrategic, military, and economic enterprise, primarily securing the interests of a handful of powerful trading companies. It's, of course, very important to differentiate between different colonial interests and different regional situations in the German Pacific Empire. Papua was different from Samoa, for example. Still, the companies ran plantation-based economies, very often relying on forced, sometimes on heavily underpaid labor. Colonial policies varied between more respectful attempts at co-option and relentless and absolutely brutal force. Economic interests were secured by a military fleet, not only against rival colonial interests, but especially also against all sorts of resistance from colonial populations. In the context of this event, seems to be one slide missing, that's fine. In the context of this event, it's important to remember that one of the ways to force local communities into the plantation systems was to destroy their voyaging and fishing vessels. The famous Loof boat that I would have liked to show you in that slide that is missing, you'll see it in a moment, bears witness to an exemplary story here. After resisting against the plantation economy, a large number of inhabitants on the Papuan island of Loof were massacred by a German punitive expedition. And not only were the villages, all the houses and the fields burned, but also all the voyaging vessels, which did not really burn much, so they chopped them up. According to colonial sources, the Loof boat here on display is allegedly the last boat that the people of Loof built, the 50 survivors, ultimately, of a population of 500 to 600. And we'll hear more about this story tomorrow and how it was brought from Loof to Berlin.
Talking about place again. Of course, this is not where we are exactly, right? This is the old palace, but I wanted to give us a sense of where we are in the sense of that old palace. It matters to us to stress in this context that German imperial involvement in Oceania by far exceeded the period of formal colonialism that Lars was just mentioning between 1884 and 1914. German sailors, soldiers, draftsmen, and scientists regularly traveled to the Pacific since the second half of the 18th century. Trading agents of different German states were a regular presence since the 19th century. And not to forget, German missionary societies, amongst others, had an effect, a devastating effect on oceanic knowledge traditions. When talking about this active German colonial engagement in Oceania in the context of the Humboldt Forum, we're really talking about a period that begins at the latest in 1773, when the German naturalists George and Johann Reinhold Forster first entered Oceania on James Cook's second voyage around the globe. And we want to share one story from our own research into the records linked to James Cook's voyages into the Pacific that relates to our conference and our place here today. The forum, as we know, and as you can see here, occupies the place of the former Berlin Palace. Between the 17th and 19th centuries, the palace housed the so-called Kunstkammer, a chamber of art and curiosities belonging to the prince-electors and kings of Prussia-Brandenburg. It contained, as was typical for the time, works of art, natural history objects, scientific instruments, and artifacts from around the world that would later form the basis of Berlin's museums. for Berlin's royals, the Kunstkammer was of great representational value. Accordingly, the rooms were decorated from floor to ceiling in high Baroque style. They were situated directly adjacent to the palace's two-story main banqueting hall. And so we can imagine that the princes and kings brought their dinner guests into these rooms to marvel, to enjoy everything that was on display here. This particular room, empty when this photo was taken, this particular room, according to a catalogue from 1805, contained or displayed a beautifully woven foot wallpaper. Please excuse the strange term, that is what the source says, from the audience chamber of the Tahitian Queen Oberera, on which James Cook and the German naturalist Johanna Leonard Forster sat. That's what the catalogue says, presumably in 1774. This tablecloth is still in the possession of the Ethnologisches Museum today. Its presence in the palace's Kunstkammer as early as 1805, along with at least 4 other Tahitian treasures, 2 of which we were privileged to see yesterday when we were in Dahlem, speaks to the long history of extracting knowledge and material culture from the region. It is equally important to us to acknowledge that Western colonialism in Oceania is still very much ongoing in various forms of dependency. When Gerd Koch, then curator of the Oceania collections at the Ethnologisches Museum, shipped large quantities of Oceanian artifacts to Berlin in the 1960s, the Solomon Islands were still firmly under British colonial control. Among these treasures is the Te Alo Folau, the large outrigger vessel from Taumako called Maunga Nefu, that we will engage with in our discussions this afternoon, is said here in the bottom corner. That is to say, the acquisition of items brought to Berlin after 1914 continued to be facilitated by what ultimately remained a colonial infrastructure well into the 20th century. The question that we have and that we have been working on together for the past days with all of us traveling these collections was the question of how do we live with this legacy? How do we live with such histories that are entangled, that are part of our stories? How do we adequately address and do justice to the many Oceanian treasures that have come to Berlin? With a brief historical overview, we hope to have shown that it is vital to be precise about the circumstances under which these artifacts came here, to acknowledge which were stolen, which were gifted or traded in different contexts and under different asymmetries of power. We also think it vital that here in Berlin, we attempt to recognize these artifacts from within the cultural contexts from which they were taken. Calling them objects, as we often do in sort of, throwaway sentences, we'll often not do. Objects can be accumulated and possessed and stored in cupboards. They can be bought and sold. They can be held on to. We do not deny that quite a few of the artifacts that we saw yesterday in Dahlem, for instance, fall under such descriptions, but there are others, we think, that are certainly not. Within Oceanian ways of being and knowing the world, we begin to understand that they embody the knowledge and wisdom of ancestors. Sometimes they might even be ancestors in a sense, and they are subjects, like the Maunga Nefu, rather than objects which extend into and intimately relate to communities and the living traditions. This image for us, for Lazami, speaks to that sense of living traditions that are on display in European collections. It's not taken from the Humboldt Forum, but it's taken from the 2018 Oceanian exhibition at the Royal Academy of Arts. But to us, it sort of conveys a sense of what it felt like going into the Bootskubus and going into the Dahlem collections yesterday. This sense of these they live. They want to be looked after. We're adamant that it is our responsibility here in Berlin to research and make known the histories that have brought such treasured artifacts to the heart of our city. At the same time, we're wary of such research if it remains preoccupied with Western collectors and their motifs and does not contribute to knowledge, culture, and survival today. It is for similar reasons also that our conference seeks to counter a museum politics that presents vessels such as the Te Ara Vaka Moana as world heritage to a metropolitan audience, but with little or no connection to the communities and the lived traditions from which they spring, and the very much future-oriented work of which such vessels form part. The delegation that you came here to see, you didn't come here to see us, we understand this. The delegation that we've been honored to welcome to Berlin over these past days has come from 4 different regions of Oceania. They came here via Vancouver, British Columbia, where they advised ocean conservation professionals and policymakers during Impact 5, the 5th International Marine Protected Areas Congress on Ocean Conservation. Over the next 2 days, they will bring some of that expertise and more to us here in Berlin and explain what it means to sail the ocean today and how lived tradition can work to ensure futures in the region and for our planet as a whole. With our focus on their expert knowledge, our conference hopes to bring a new relevance, reverence, and life to the so-called Luftboat from Papua, to the Taumako, Te Ara Vaka Moana, to the Wallop from the Marshall Islands, and to the Fiji and Drua that are on display in the heart of our landlocked city, Berlin. What might their role be in relation to the many projects throughout Oceania that are working to reactivate the knowledge of building seagoing vessels and to study the arts of wayfinding and navigation? How might they contribute once again to a future-oriented politics in the region that ensures economic, ecological, and cultural survival? We can't speak to this, so it's high time that we finally welcome to the stage our 3rd organizer, Mimi George. Welcome.
Meke aloha, tatou. I am very happy to be here with people from the 4 cultures, the 4 regions, to represent themselves and their knowledge. And very grateful to Lars and Anya for their students and their helpers and their allies in the institutions for their welcome and support to allow this to happen. So I want to tell you, my job here is to, at the moment, is to talk about voyaging perpetuations and revivals in the Pacific. But I want to tell you not what's been widely publicized, but what many of you, I think, have not heard about. So I'm going to start with the 1870s work of a German origin yacht designer, Nathaniel Herreshoff. He designed a Pacific proa in Boston. He entered it in 3 races. Now, proa is the design of everyone here, okay? You'll see, it will be explained what proa is. It's a double-ended vessel that has either a smaller hull or a large float, kept to windward. Okay, and it's a very, we'll talk about how sustainable and high performing it is compared to any other vessel. But these proas that Nathaniel Herreshoff designed averaged better than 19 knots per hour, nautical miles per hour, while the yachts of the time were making 9. So after 3 races, they managed to ban and make it illegal in America to make proa. Yeah. So 100 years later, we began to have ice boaters and Great Lakes racers, day sail type racers start making proa. And a man named Jim Brown started making note of proa performance as an international sustainable sea transport design. And he promoted it in Africa, in Western Pacific, through the United Nations. His son made a proa, a number of them, but one that proa was the one that sailed around Cape Horn single-handed last year. In 1960, David Lewis and his 2 girls, I should say, while we have this, I don't know how many have gone by. I'm in control. Okay. Can I go backwards? No. Okay, I just want to point out, because Seta is not going to show this slide, but this is a drua, a proa from in Fiji, next to, oh, here we go. We're now at Vanikoro in Southeast Solomon Islands. In 1906, this photo was taken of ancestors of Luke and Betty, who will speak to you soon. Okay, will it go? No. Okay, there we go. 1960, back in the Atlantic, and sailing around the world in the first catamaran that we know of to go around the world. David Lewis and his family, a young family, made that voyage. But I sailed with David for 13 years. And I know that he attended the native school in Rarotonga. And there he heard the chants and the stories, the oral traditions of how to sail to Aotearoa, to New Zealand from Rarotonga. So they put away their instruments and followed the chant and arrived there. And when he then was writing about this and eventually was heard, he later did some research that resulted in a book, We the Navigators, which even lately, Ben Finney, before he died, was describing as the Bible of the only information they had of a kind of a survey of Pacific navigation methods, traditional ancient ones. Very preliminary, very basic, and emphasizing stars. And why did he emphasize stars? Because Europeans for several hundred years had this narrative that people were lost, they drifted, got to these islands by accident. And what would European believe would work if you didn't have instruments? If you knew the stars. So he emphasized star navigation in that book. Okay, so just to mention, Luke's grandfather, Colosso Cavea, he sailed in the 1920s through Solomon Islands as a boy on his sister's, well, it's just going on its own, on his sister's tepuke. And he graduated very quickly from bailout boy to steersman. He was precocious. In 1935, he attended a meeting of chiefs from all the islands of the Southeast Islands, huge area. And they decided at that time that the British had been there since, had really taken charge, a presence since 1922. And that's why his father sent him to be with his sister, to get away from the revenge activities, because they resisted the British. So anyway, at this meeting of chiefs, the chiefs from all the islands of Tuamotu met, and they decided that they must accept and use the currency of the British, shillings. But they retained red feather money in use specifically only for things having to do with vessels, with control of vessels and marriages. That was an attempt to keep something going of cultural. Okay, in 1942 to about 1956, Kevea rebuilt a disintegrated old scow wreck and crewed on it between Tuamotu and southern Vanuatu. It was a coast watcher vessel, but he was able to bring things to all these islands to his people because other vessels had been confiscated, stopped, made illegal, and there was a war going on with lots of shooting and submarines and stuff. So 1963, the last Te Puke broke up in Tuamotu. When I say Te Puke, I'm talking about what Taumako people call Te Puke. It's not what is still on the card, the captions at the Dalam saying that that's a Te Puke. It's not a Te Puke, it's a Te Alo, and Luke's going to explain the difference. But we know it's really hard to change captions in museums. It takes many years, actually, just as it does in Hawaii. They told us they couldn't do it for 55 or 6 years. And we started with them 30 years ago. So they still haven't changed them. Okay. David, the basis for We the Navigators was only 9 months of research. He sailed through cyclones and went to 9 different archipelagos in the Pacific as much as he could do. It took him 18 months to, thank you, to write up. And yeah, but when he was finished, when We the Navigators was completed, he was supposed to get a PhD, but they decided not to give it to him because it was against the narrative. There were people, well, one of the people died on his committee, so the vote was that they wouldn't let that information out. Okay, 1970, Kevea and the crew built and sailed the Te Puke to Lata to show it, and they were told that the Duke, the Queen's wife, husband, wanted to buy it. But when he saw it, he thought it was not what he wanted. So he didn't buy it. You may see it online. A 1977 clip of people bringing that out and showing it on YouTube. In 1970, Hipor from Caroline Islands, from an island not far from Mario and Lolo's island, he commanded David's yacht navigating from Polowat to Saipan after 3 generations of no one being able to do it, being prevented from doing it. So it was oral tradition that allowed him to go and kept alive through his school, through the traditional school that allowed him to do it. This is a baurua from Kiribati. This is an incompleted taratai, I believe. Taratai made a voyage in the 70s to Fiji. You never hear about these anymore. All we hear about is Hokulea. So there are others, there are many others. In the late 60s, early 70s, the world sailors, Nancy and Bob Griffith, and a bunch of barefoot youth built 2 large log canoes for their friends in Tuamotu. They were traditional vessels. They were the best they could do, and they managed to deliver one of them. The first one was confiscated by the Coast Guard. Yeah, didn't understand it was a seaworthy vessel. Okay, Chechimini. Oh, please show me Chechimini. Yeah. In 1975, that's the year before Hokulea's first voyage, Chechimini made a 3,500 nautical mile voyage from Satawal to Saipan to Okinawa. It's in the museum in Okinawa. They had no escort vessel. And you can see that online too. It's just come online. You can order the movie that was made at the time, Japanese. 1976, Hokulea made its first voyage to Tahiti. Oh, I don't think, yeah, there we go. And 2015 through 2017 made a voyage around the world. And this picture was taken when we let them off tow, because we towed them. The escort boat towed them all the way around South Africa, because catamarans don't go to windward very well, and they're pretty slow. So it's dangerous going around South Africa. The boat was not built to go around South Africa. So there were many instances of having to tow, as there always are when you have a vessel that has to show up at the times of events, welcome events, farewell events, museum events, where it doesn't have anything to, Festival of Arts, which are held during cyclone season. So it's very hard, for anyone to sail the way you should sail in terms of when the wind is good for sailing or when the conditions are right. But boy, they did it. They went around the world and they spread, as they have, they've spread awareness and pride, and they put the focus on taking care of the planet and how the first people were capable of making very long voyages. So 1979 through 80, the museum, the government through the museum in Solomon Islands, made an order from Taumako, or to Taumako, depending on how you look at it, to build a te puke and to sail it to the Pacific Arts Festival in Port Moresby. Luke's grandfather, Kavea, where are you, Luke? I can't, oh, look, I'm like, Luke's grandfather led the building, led the navigation, the voyage. The government forced them to take the worst possible route because they wanted them to show up at the museum and show up. And then they held them because they didn't think it was seaworthy to go on to Papua New Guinea for the festival. They demanded that they that they put a, 500-pound life raft on it. And they wanted publicity and stuff. So by the time they let it go, it was cyclone season. And the Te Puke took off for, not going to give up to go to Papua New Guinea. Immediately there was a cyclone and 2 government ships that were out there among them sank. But the Te Puke got through. But when they got to the far western end of the Solomons, there was no more wind. So they never made it all the way. That's maybe why you didn't hear about them. I happened to be standing in Papua New Guinea waiting for them. Yeah. So in the 70s through 1970s through 2016, there were Pacific Arts Festivals every 2, 3, 4 years. And the last one was in Guam. It featured, I'm not sure how many, Mario, 13 vessels from Marianas or something like that, at least that many, yeah. They sailed in, including a vessel that was built in California. It was from a redwood log by the Chamorro community in San Diego. In the 1980s until now, the star navigation system that Nainoa Thompson, head of the Polynesian Voyaging Society that Hokulea was built by, he created, in the late 80s, he created the star navigation system that PVS, Polynesian Voyaging Society, still uses, and many other voyaging organizations through the Pacific still use today. Because like in Hawaii, they did not know, it was forgotten. It was so many 100 years in Hawaii. Even when Cook arrived, it had been 400 or 500 years since there were migrations, since there were voyages happening outside of the Hawaiian archipelago. So yes, there was missing information. So it had to be done in that circumstance. Here we have people who know their traditional, their ancient knowledge systems, including navigation. The end, yes, some a little bit is missing, but nothing is totally gone. And if they can teach their children, it's also retrievable. How do you teach them? By making voyages. Okay, I'm almost through here. Let's say 13 more vessels were built by a British, led by and initially funded. There's still ongoing funding from a German businessman, and who's interested in saving the ocean. He built fiberglass, what we call one design, catamarans, not proa, catamarans, as revival support vessels, not perpetuation like these people are talking about. And most of them are supported by taking tourists out. Some of them, a few of them are even able to take students out. Are you signaling me time's up? Oh, someone, okay. But Dieter Paulman was very interested in trying out electric engines. So there were experimental electric engines on these vessels. They're not repairable. They're not maintainable in out islands. Not even in Honolulu. They had extreme trouble, not even in the big cities, because it's experimental. So this is not an answer. It's not proven to be an answer. They haven't worked out well. they had to get a vessel with a diesel in order, the one that I was on, in order to escort Hokulea around the world, because it's not yet working to have electric engines, solar powered electric. So the late 1990s to 2023, a couple of Drua have been sailing, which Seta will tell you about very soon. Others were built for museums. Okay, so I'm going to make two conclusions. I mean, I could go on for days. There's so much that is unknown, has not been remembered in the public media or academia. But one, in the 1970s and well into, these are proa, well into this century until now, the cultural revival pride in the proof that Pacific technology was capable and that people did it, and they could still do it. They can prove it. They proved it. So that was the big narrative, that Hokulea was one of the vessels, the most well-known vessel to demonstrate. The most media reported vessel. Now, too, the main focus is on establishing sustainable sea transport and reopening ancestral sea routes. Let's see what I have here. Oh, there we go. Reopening the borders, let these people sail. They're still closed. There's still extreme obstacles and extreme expense involved to get people from outer islands even to get a passport, especially women and children. So, but the whole maritime industry is built on standards that are not, that block them. But they're still doing their best to do it, and they're still making voyages. So these vessels are lifelines for their communities, for their regions. Ships will never serve them. They never did. Plus, they make everything dirty and spoil everything, just like mining and logging and removing things from the seabed, etc. So modern vessels have choked off these communities and modern and colonial rules. So now we have islands being drowned by the rising sea of climate change. The agricultural areas, even on the high islands, are not working anymore. Not possible to raise food. The vessels are needed even more. But no island was able to sustain itself alone anyway. They're not continents. People sustain themselves by getting food and materials they need from other islands, and not to mention marriage partners. Yeah. So, so now the main focus is on having these. There's one from Taiwan, and from Vanuatu. And, oh, I guess this isn't on. Shoots. Another one from Vanuatu in 1980. Oh, surprise. Whoops, how come? Okay, so this is, I want to make it clear that the rules nowadays are almost all of the places are forcing traditional vessels to have escort vessels that have engines. This has just come into play in the last maybe 5 years in Solomon Islands, and actually Luke had a 25-year career at sea for the Marine Police of Solomon Islands, but he also was the lead in establishing the new merchant marine standards for safety, etc. And yeah, have to have an engine, vessel with an engine, or you can't teach children out to sea on a traditional vessel. So this is an answer that Pacific Tradition Society raised funds for, to have this built in Hawaii. It's ready to be launched, and now I'm spending my night times arguing with officials in Hawaii who don't know what a proa is and think it's not seaworthy, even though it has an engine. Okay, so I think I've said enough about the, I hope I've said enough about the need to perpetuate the ancient knowledge that's based on many thousands of years about the ocean, about sustainable vessels that go faster, take less trees, less materials than catamarans, and are much more sustainable and contribute to the saving of biodiversity, because every traditional vessel is made of hundreds of different plants, not just one. It's not just the fiberglass and the plywood. It's a matter of taking care of everything on the reef, the island, and the ocean in order to make that vessel, and involving every man, woman, and child. So the knowledge can continue. And yeah, we're even willing to, we have to do this, or the children are not allowed to go out and learn. You learn these things at sea. You don't learn them from satellites and big ships sailing around the ocean with people who don't know anything about the ocean. These people live the ocean, and I'm going to turn over to Setareki Ledua, who will tell you much more than me.
Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to the first panel of today's conference day. And that panel is dedicated to Fiji. Our main presenter is going to be Setareki Ledua. But before I'm going to do an official introduction for Setareki, I actually want to welcome Gina Knapp to the stage. Gina Knapp is the curator of visual anthropology at the Humboldt Forum. So please join me in welcoming her.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for coming us. I would like just to welcome you all. Aloha and morning through. I'm very happy to see you all here, and that we're having the chance to host this conference here at Humboldt Forum. I'm not going to talk a lot. I just wanted to point out in the introduction, as Anya has said, and as you probably all know, it's true, we are here in a very highly disputed place. And what we are trying to do, I'm speaking for myself and for my colleagues from the Ethnological Museum, which is inside this building, we're counteracting this stupid Prussian castle. But to tell anyone, we have just started a new program, which is called the Collaborative Museum. And I would like to encourage you, maybe on Friday when our director will join us. There's a lot of new projects coming up. There's a lot of collaboration going on, also regarding working about our colonial past, also concerning the Luftboot, for example. You will hear more on that tomorrow. But please just have in mind that we are really trying to, well, to do collaboration in a true sense and actually deal with the past in a good way.
So thanks so much for coming. I think before we go to the presentation, we would like to show you a short clip of a film. You have all been to the exhibition already and seen the Drua. We were so happy that we had the chance to have two gentlemen from Fiji coming over to actually put it together here. It was, of course, previously kind of built in Fiji. You can't do the whole process here, but the pieces came here. It was all put together here. And it was a great experience. I'm also seeing Leonie Gettner, the restorator from the South Pacific here in the audience, which was great because she also played a big role in this. Thanks for coming. So we have a 12-minute video clip, which is a rough cut. This is not like the end product, just to document the building of the mounting of this Drua. And I think you can enjoy watching it. And then we will have a professional presentation about the Drua. All right, enjoy, and thank you so much for being here.
Drua is actually a Fijian sailing vessel or canoe that is double-hulled, because Drua means something that is similar in nature or twin. So we can call this, this is called the Drua because it has two hulls, almost similar in size. So it's a double-hulled Fijian sailing canoe.
And what was the purpose of such a Drua?
Actually, the purpose of a Drua was used for sailing, you know, especially for long voyages to carry cargoes, and also it was used in the 1800 centuries, you know, during travel wars, and also for carrying a large number of people from one point to another point. And the ropes that is used on this, you can see all the ropes that are used, the small one, the big ones, they are coconut quires made from coconut husk.
And there's so much binding, isn't it?
Oh, a lot of binding here. There's so much binding.
Is it the most time-consuming work, or?
It is time-consuming, like from the bottom of the hull to join it with the side or the side plank, and also to the tow. You have to join it. After that, then you put the castles, you know, tie it up again. Then put the flooring. Then you put this and bind them again. You know, so all bindings from one to another.
These boats, were they bigger, or did they have the same size, or and how many people were on these boats?
Yeah, there are histories of big boats, like this one well-known Fijian Drua called the Rusa Ivanua. That one can carry 300 people, about 200, 300 people, with 16 crews, and all their belongings and their food, you know, while traveling in open seas. Yeah, and it's quite a huge one.
Women and children?
Women and children, with the chiefs, with almost anyone who want to go.
And is it was it a boat for a chief, or was it a boat for old people? A Drua?
Actually, the boat is actually built for the chief. You know, when the chief want a boat, he consult his builders, traditional builders, to build the Drua for him. So it is usually owned by chiefs. Yeah, and as you can see, this boat here is fully equipped for long voyages. Even you can see it has spears there hanging on the side of the house, and that is actually to protect, you know, whoever is traveling, and maybe a chief traveling on this boat. And also during those days, you know, they have, you know, travel wars, so maybe people fighting between each other, so they may be going on another Drua. These people going on another Drua, so those are used for protection.
How many people are necessary to sail a Ledua?
I think for safety, for this size Drua, 2 people, will be the best for sailing this Drua. But for big ones, for very big ones, like twice, 3 times the size of this, we need more people because it is takes a lot of energy to people to raise the sail and also to change direction, to pull the foot of the sail from one side to another and even to lift it up, to put it on the proper place. It's quite a lot of people. Even the oars, for this, we call it the radar. This is small, but for big ones, maybe 2 people can carry this one, out of the water and back to the water. So it needs a lot of muscles, to do the job. Yeah, even if there's no wind, when there's no wind, you still have to move. So you use the, the pedal, and this is where the holes are for. You put it down and then you move 1, 2. So 2 people, 1, 2 people here, and 2 people from the back. And most of the big ones, they have 4. 1, another one here, 2, 3, 4, and 8, another 4 from there. When there's no wind, so they still have to move using manual power, So you need 4 of those oars, and they stand up straight like this. It's not like this, but you stand straight and then go like this.
You ever sailed a Drua?
I've sailed a Drua. Yeah, the Drua that I sailed was the smaller Drua, the one in London at the moment, and the ETA. We sailed that one for 1 year. Yeah. And the rest of the time, we've been sailing the smaller version of the Fijian canoe, which is a Taumako. We've been sailing that one.
Who built this Drua?
Okay, this Drua was built by a team of craftsmen, and we'll name them Mr. Domonicere Rongovosa, the one who is here, whom we are assembling it together, Misa Ele, Vama, and Vati, and myself, who was leading the team. Yeah, so we are the ones that actually worked on this Drua. And we have 3 women who weave the mat for us. But initially, when we have to bring the wood from the bush to the shore, in the islands, we have to involve the villages, even the young children, to carry the logs from, little logs, the big logs, to carry it from the bush to the village. Because when the wood is wet, once they start, just after they fell the tree, it's quite heavy. So it requires the whole village to do this job. We usually call it yarawanga. We have a covering here, which we call the puke or the tau. Some call it the tau, some call it the puke. This is called the wave breaker. It breaks up the wave before it hits the, the part. Yeah. For storage of cargo. Yep. Storage of cargos. Yeah. All the joints are inside. So we have to put a covering here. The reason for that is that when the waves comes in, because this boat doesn't only go on the surface of the water, it also can dive into the water. When we have a big wave, like a 4-3 meter wave, it just go through. So the wave can just go right from here, hit the house and go right to the back. So we have to cover this so that the wave water just travel on top. It doesn't go, it goes in some of it. That's why you have this to bail the water out from there. So every boat will have this. So that means the water will actually go in, So you use this to bail the water out. There are 2. So every boat will have a, we call it a bela, or in Fijian language, we call it the nima. Nima. You know, that means if you have this, that means it will carry water somehow. Maybe from the leakage, you know, water going in from the all the joints, or from the top, or from the rain, you know. So you have to bail the water out. Yeah. So yeah.
Why do we need this?
Okay, this part here, actually, you can see that it's shaking a little bit, but the load is actually downwards, not upwards. You know, to raise the mast, you have to get the rope across the this castle. We call this a castle. Castle. This one's the castle. Castle, like in the house, you know, like the rafters. It's a cross beam, eh? So the castle, so it goes around it. Then you tie it onto this. So the force is actually going down.
What about these shells?
Okay, the shells, I always, my version of it is that it symbolizes a lady. You know, it symbolizes a lady because the lady, even when they go dancing, they have a shell hanging from them, it's jewelry. And I can only say not only a lady, it's a chiefly lady, because this white shelf is only used for ceremonies that involve a chief. And secondly, I can say that it's for navigation. So in the night, when you have the night, when you don't see your enemies, you know, or you don't see each other, this thing will be shining in the night. So you can see, oh, the boat is, yeah. If no shells, you can see it. So those two shells up there, and there's a one down here. So maybe reflecting. Okay, the domo, you know, it's shaped like a U or Y. It's very unique, you know, even the way it is carved, and it has a different wood. So we have to join it on top there. The wood that is used for that is the vesi, because it doesn't wear off quickly. Because when you are racing and lowering the sail, you know, the rope has to rub onto it. I feel satisfied. I feel very happy that this drawer is finally finished in this very nice room, exhibition area, this museum. Yeah, and I think this can be used for educational purposes for the children, and also can be an ambassador of Fiji being sitting here. Not many people know about Fiji, but when they say, oh, that's a drawer, from where? Oh, from Fiji. Where's Fiji? Oh, Fiji in the very far away in the Pacific Ocean. At least they know Fiji from that, you know. So that's why I think I like all of us who built this drawer appreciate and appreciate the idea that it is sitting in a nice place and it will last for a very long time while sitting here. And people can learn from it, can admire the, you know, how Fijians actually do their artwork, you know, building a drawer like this. Yeah, I'm glad that
So as promised, now comes the official introduction to Setareki Ledua. We're actually so happy that you can be here. It seems to be a little wonder because there have been so many emails. There were so many Zoom meetings and we were sweating and anxious about visa requirements. So yeah, it's actually wonderful that you can join us in Berlin. As a child, Setareki lived with his grandparents on Fulaga Island in the Lau group of Fiji. They took him sailing between islands on traditional Taumako vessels. They fished and gathered seafoods, and they partnered with people of other islands. This made their island life way sustainable. They monitored and cared for the ocean and all its diverse creatures, plants, winds, rains, stars, and seasons. In 2010, Setareki graduated from Fiji Institute of Technology and began studying both modern and traditions of maritime navigation. The same year, he was certified as NZCG day skipper and boat master. In 2011, Setareki embarked on a 2-year voyage from Fiji to the United States of America, through New Zealand, French Polynesia, Hawaii Island, and all the way to Mexico, Cocos Island, Galapagos, and back to the Pacific. In 2016, Setareki graduated from Maritime School with a Master in Engineering and became captain of the sailing vessel Moana Dinarau. In 2017, he became captain of the sailing catamaran Utunialo. Setareki has sailed more than 80,000 sea miles, which is equivalent to twice the distance around the world. From 2018 to present, he's captain of the only sailing traditional Fijian drua and executive director of drua sailing experience in Suva, Fiji. But now, without further ado, please welcome Setareki Ledua.
How do we do this thing? So yeah, mula vinaka, it's a way of saying hello in Fiji, mula vinakas, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Not really, but yeah, because it's cold. So yeah, I mean, as Laura has introduced myself, and thank you for having me, and to the university that organized for us to be here, and to the landowners, thank you for having us. You know, yesterday I took a sail around the Pacific in the last, probably over 200 years ago. So I sailed around the Pacific within half a day, and finding out the similarities of what the people in the Pacific have, which is, you know, it's really amazing. And I happened to see, and because the Drua, the people of the Samoa, they call it the Alia, and the Tongan, they call it the Kalia, but we from Fiji, we call it the Drua, which is the same meaning, the same design. So I happened to walk into the room yesterday and see the model of the same design Drua being housed by the, you know, for the museum. And you know, it's a proud moment for me, really. And so yeah, the Vola Singapore, which is the Drua, the only selling Drua in the world at the moment. Yeah, currently the only selling Drua, traditional Fijian Drua, you know, in Fiji. So the new rising star. So, you know, for those of you who have been to Fiji, I keep saying this, and Sana will tell you that so Fiji is the most beautiful place in the world. And if you happen to be in Fiji, you know, it's you might not want to leave Fiji if you happen to stay in Fiji. But for me, as you know, as a captain for the only sailing Drua, it's living the dream. I've sailed around the world, not around the world, it's most part of the world, and I've sailed around the Pacific 3 times as a chief officer and a trained navigator. You know, and to be here in Berlin, witness what my forefathers have done before me. So I'm just carry on the legacy. And the Drua, there was you know, house by the other side of this building. It was built by my dad. So my dad was here to you know, last year assembling the Drua. So you know, I don't have any comments since you know, I haven't built a Drua, but you know, I was involved with the building of this one. But you know, it's good to be here, carry on the legacy of my forefathers. How do we do this? Oh yeah, there you go. So I'll just let this one play before I started, if that's all right. So last year, I happened to meet Luke, Betty, and Mimi for the first time in Fiji. So we took a Drua out for, you know, for a little ride, filming, and And then Mimi and I have been meeting on social media, email, and I haven't met Mimi in my life. And the first time I met Mimi in Ledua, and happened to be the first time that I sail on the Drua. But currently the only sailing Drua in the world, and it's capable of doing half speed of the wind. And the top speed that we clocked on the Drua was 15.8 knots. For us, in the people in the Pacific, obviously we are connected to the ocean. We are the people of the oceans. It's in our livelihood, in our canoe, in our Drua, our waka, and our wanga connect us to the ocean. They connect a different island of different culture, even though we have similarities in our culture, but they enable us, our ocean to be our highway. So people believe that the ocean separates us, but through voyaging on our traditional canoe, the oceans connect us to our our waka connects us to our ocean. It connects us closer to our neighboring country, and it's also our lifeline. And today boats are unsustainable. So this picture is a double hull Tongan design double hull canoe, of course with Drua, and our knowledge of oceans, our protection is learned and being updated while we're voyaging from island to island. And this is a photograph of more than 10 Druas sailing in one wind direction. So all the angles of these sails. So this is the angle of the different angle of a sail. A Drua can sail with one wind direction, except we can go downwind. So in 2016, well, it took us almost 2 years to build Evolve Singapore. So in 2016, we launched Evolve Singapore. If you happen to be in Fiji, so it's a direct replica of the last surviving Drua, not the last surviving Drua, but the Drua that was built in 1913 by my uncle, great uncle Setareki Matayalona. So I've been sailed till 1930, and it's been gifted to the Fiji Museum, and it's been housed by the Fiji Museum till today. So in 2016, we built a direct replica of the Ratufina, which is the one being housed by the Fiji Museum. And of course, we have to build it to the most important thing to accommodate the regulations of the maritime regulations requirements. So we register as a trading, commercial trading business, and we operate it as a tourism small business, in a way that we can maintain the Drua and the crew are looking after the Drua, since it was a private funded project by Dr. Peter Nuttall from New Zealand. And it's, of course, it's currently the only sailing Drua in the world at the moment. You may ask, why a traditional Fijian Drua? So our vision was to start a traditional navigation canoe building in Fiji. That's one of our main missions, for us to bring back the culture of traditional boat building and navigation in Fiji, because the last in our next few slides will show you how Fiji looks like in the last 5 to 10 years, and even 100 years ago, till last year. It's said, but it's a reality. But why a traditional Fijian Drua? Of course, and to revitalize and bring back traditional culture into Fiji water. And because of climate change, we try to prove that to decarbonize and to prove traditional sailing can be a solution to sustainable sea transportation, especially for us living in maritime island. I know we need transport to go out to sea, to go fish, or even to go to the hospital if we have anybody emergency wise. And also in Fiji, we hope that we can encourage more youth to involve youth within Suva area in traditional boat building and and navigations. You know, we can't all work in our office in high jobs and lawyers. So, you know, this is, I mean, it can be proved. It also can be an opportunity for the youths, you know, that tend to drop out. But that's in Fiji. There, one of our main aim is to recruit dropout school students. You know, students that end up in the street, you know, causing troubles in Fiji. You know, to give them a second chance on how can they create an opportunity for them and for their family and for their future. And that's also one of our main missions that we're trying to include into our organization. And of course, you know, we have to appreciate the past to honor our ancestors before we strive for the future. You know, Dr. Peter Nuttall was privately. I'll tell you the story of Dr. Peter Nuttall. So Dr. Peter Nuttall is really, he's really, you know, obsessed with the Drua. He did a research and he wrote a book about the Drua. And when his mom passed away, Dr. Peter Nuttall didn't know that his mom inherited, you know, sum of money for him. So when his mom passed away, and then you know, a few weeks later, he got a call that he has a sum of money that was inherited for him. So when he got the money, he said, you know, I don't need the money. So he gave the money to his older son, thinking that, you know, his older son's gonna roam around the world using up all that money. So when, you know, 2 weeks later, his sons, because they were living in Fiji, because Dr. Peter Nuttall was teaching at the University of the South Pacific in Fiji in sustainable sea transportation department down in Fiji. You know, 2 weeks later, his older son turned up to Fiji, telling his Dr. Peter Nuttall, I wanted to build a Drua. And Dr. Peter Nuttall looking at him, think he was crazy. And so he said, are you sure you want to build a Drua? I said, yeah, I want to build a Drua. So I don't want to waste the money. I want to build a Drua. So they get you know, expert from Te Papa Museum, because none of them knows how to build a Drua. So they drew the line of the last surviving Drua, the Ratufina, which is housed by the Fiji Museum. And they found out some secret of how to build a Drua. You know, even though you're looking at the Drua, it's just straight, but it's, you know, the hulls are not straight. It's built to a secret on, you know, how fast you can sail and how closer you can sail into the wind. So it took us almost 2 years to build a Drua, you know, out of scratch. None of us knows how to build a Drua. So we happen to, you know, to have the assistance of some old people that still have the knowledge of building the Drua, that help us and guide us along the way. So, and that's, you know, the product of you know, building a Drua. And that's the Drua Ivola Singapore is Dr. Peter Nuttall's mom. So it's their heritage. And when they moved back to New Zealand in 2020, they put the Drua up on the market and sell the Drua. And so Dr. Peter Nuttall's partner said, you know, why are you selling the Drua? Why don't you just gift it the Drua to Seta? Because Seta's been, you know, we have been running the Drua. I've been working for them for the last 6 years. So they decided, you know, to take the Drua off the market. So they you know, they gifted the Drua to me. So and I have to register my own company so they can transfer the ownership of the Drua under my name. So that's how, you know, stand proud to be the only local Fijians that own a Drua, which is the New Rising Star. Ivola Singapore is translated as the New Rising Star. It's the only selling, the reason, because it's after so many years, and there's another selling Drua out in the water, which is Ivola Singapore. That's why we name it the New Rising Star. Ivola Singapore is actually planet Venus, the brightest star that rises before the suns. So for us in Fiji, we know every morning we see these brightest stars before the sunrise. So we call it the Ivola Singapore. So as soon as we see this bright star, it tell us like a few hours later the sun's going to come up. And Vo is translated as a new, so the new rising star. So it's simply because it's been over 100 years, and we have a tour sailing again, and it's the only sailing tour. So we have to appreciate our past before we strive for the future. And then my dad and my uncle Domo, which is he passed away last year. When my dad and Chochi was here to assemble the tour, he was in the hospital and passed on. So that 30 plus years ago, they built a tour in Vulanga. It's called the Tampusoro, and sailed to Suva, and of course end up in the same industry as the tourism operators in a way to maintain the tour. But in early 2000, there was a cyclone came into Fiji and wrecked the tour and break everything, so it disappeared. And since then, there hasn't been a tour been built. But Master Chochi and my dad and my uncle building tours only to be gifted to the museum, except they sell the Antieta, which is now in London, for less time. So and for the last 30 years, and there was even last 10 years there was more than 50 traditional canoe in Fiji. And for us, our organization in 2018 to 2019, we have we are so fortunate to have a little grant from IUCN to teach the youths within the Suva area on how the basics about traditional canoe building and navigation. And so the pictures you've seen is for the youth, the age from the youngest the younger that we taught was 6.5 years, and the oldest was 56 years old. So that's it's the age between, and we have trained more than 83% of our target that involved with our program. And so in 2019, 2020, we're also fortunate to have a grant from the US Embassy to implement the same program in the western side of Fiji. And when we started halfway through our training program, COVID came and stopped everything. And then when the movement was easy up a bit, we were sitting, we were doing nothing. There was no booking coming in because we were in the tourism industry. And I told one of my crewmates, and I was like, oh, how about we sail to the Lau? And he was looking at me, and I look around and said, you sure? I said, yeah, let's do it. And 2000, so we asked the US Embassy if we can use the remainder of the funding for us to sail to the Lau. As a homecoming sail. So back in the days, the Lemaki, which is the boat builders from Samoa, and the Chafau, the boat builders from Tonga, they used to settle in the Lau group. So this is where I came from. So the people from Samoa and Tonga, they used to settle in the Lau group. They built big tours, and because of the southeasterly trade winds, so this is their way going up, and they stop in the main island, the old capital of Fiji, before they sail across to the Pacific. So so the Lau group was the building center of the Central Oceania. So the people from Samoa and Tonga, they settle in the Lau group, and they build big tours. They carry more than 200 people, and they sail it across to the Pacific. And the reason why we call the homecoming sail, because there was a record of the Drua sailing from the Lau group, but never a record of the Drua sailing back to the Lau group. And we dig up, when we dig deep, there's still no records of the Drua sailing back to the Lau group because of this. They are Drua sailing back, but was never recorded. We heard stories of the Drua sailing back, but they took different routes because of the southeasterly trade winds. So we call it a homecoming sail because we wanted to retrace that route going upwind to the Lau group. The European people knew that we drifted with the trade wind, but we've proven that we can sail upwind. So it's a matter of waiting for the perfect weather to go upwind. So the winds, it's not going to come from the same direction every day. It's going to change because of climate change. So we started from the western side of Fiji. We go around Koro, one of the well-known roughest seas in Fiji. Took us 25 hours to cross this distance because we were just going into the wind, and we happened to go against the swell. So sometimes over 2 meter swells, and in the morning I was on watch from 3 to 6 in the morning, and me and my watch buddy, it took us 3 times to boil our kettles, because every time the waves slip off the Ledua, our kettle comes off the stoves, and he almost kicked it overboard. Funny here, Seru. Seru is one of the well-known crew for the voyage that we did. So and then I have to, because he was on the woolly, and then I have to boil the kettle. So every time the Ledua comes up, the kettle fell off the stoves, and it came off, and all the waters spill off. So I have to refill it and put in. It took us, I have to boil the kettle 3 times, and the 3rd time it fell off, and he kicked it. It almost fell overboard. Lucky there was the house, the kettle stopped by the house, and I said, okay, we wait till everyone wakes up, and then we boil the kettle. So it took us 7 weeks. To do the whole trip as a homecoming sail. So we call it the homecoming sail because we wanted to retrace the route. And also, I left my island. I grew up in the island, and I left my island in 2006. And I haven't been to Vulanga ever since then, because I came to Hawaii. So it took me almost 15 years to find my way back to my island. So, and I happened to take the Ledua, which is a proud moment, coming into my home island with the Ledua. So we call it a homecoming sail, for that reason. And for us to go and, to retrace back the route and to honor our ancestors and seeking, for their permission for us to move forward and continue, carry on the legacy. And of course, we also, because our mission was to start at navigation school, but we haven't been managed to find funding for what we intend to do. But I pull up, what we want in the future is we want a traditional canoe house where we recruit the youth to build their own canoe and teach them how to sail their own canoe. So when they graduate, when they finish, they can take their own canoe and they can do whatever they wanted to do with their canoe, whether they want to take it to the island, whether they register as a business, and that's up to them. So that's, what we, in a way we can create an opportunity for the youth to build and sail their own canoe. And of course, 10 to 15 years, it's too long, but 5 to 10 years from now, I hope to see more than 100 rowers in Fiji waters, and I pray to God that I live to see the day that this for many rowers sailing back into Fiji waters. You may ask why we're here, why we sail into Berlin. Of course, we're in a World War III fight against climate change, and of course we need everyone on the same boat fighting for climate change. And for us, we come from a dot. If you see our island on the map, it's just a little island, and because of the rising sea levels, most of our island is almost underwater, especially San College Island from PNG. And so yeah, that's why we're here now, to make waves, to raise our voice, to represent our community and the people in the Pacific that struggle for a long time in terms of climate change. And we're here to make wave. If there's a way, and if there's a way, if there's a will, there's a way. So there's a way to to cater for fight climate change by bringing back the old knowledge and bringing back and revitalize traditional canoe building and sailing culture into the Pacific in a way that we can use less fossil fuel, that contribute to a climate change. And because it's easy to, it's sustainable, and it costs, don't have to cost. It's we use wind, which is free. You can go, you can pack and go anytime you want, except Sana. You have to ask the government of PNG if you want to go anywhere. So that's why we're here. We're here because we need your support. Support our little island. They are almost underwater, and for the last few years, Tuvalu, most of Tuvalu Islands has been underwater, and most of the people from Tuvalu has been relocated into Fiji, which is a sad thing to do. And of course, that's the last thing I want to do, is to sail to Sana Island and rescue him from. I think Thorn knows, because Sana's Island is just a really small island. And if we're not going to do anything now, all these islands going to go underwater in the next 3-5 years. And then, but lucky for us, we have Drua, and Matua Mario have his own canoe, for 500 canoes really. And then we're gonna have to gonna have to sail into Sana to save him. It's taken him a long time to build his own canoe. And now, of course, our partnership, and we happen to have our MOU with one of the university in Fiji. So our project started in March. So as soon as I get back from this trip, we're gonna use the Drua to sell to the community in Fiji. So one of the university, there's 5 universities that are involved in this project, and one of the universities, they're going to be focused on a community outreach program. So they're going to find out from community what's really affected them, what climate change affected them, by finding out the changing of weather pattern, the rising of tides, what cause of the coral, why is the coral along the coast has been dead, and all those little stuff. That's in another university. They're going to identify the threat and the change of rising sea level in the community. And of course, the most important part is for where the Drua comes in to transport the people from the university from one community to another community, by interacting with the community in our outreach program. And then with our partnership, we hope to build more canoes and help our community sail and maintain their own canoe. So sailing into our future. This is what I've talked about before. So in the top right corner, that's Fiji in over 100 years ago. So over here is Fiji in 5 years ago. The top one is Fiji in 10 years ago. Here, we're the only one in Drua. That's Fiji now. There's no more traditional sailing canoe in Fiji except my Drua. So it's sad, but that's reality. The introduction of fiberglass boat with outboard engine, it take away the pride of what our people have. And so I intend to forget who they are and where they come from, with what they're known for in terms of traditional sail and canoe building. And they think fiberglass boat solve the problem of day-to-day transport within the island. And so, yeah, and it's my hope to reverse. From today in Fiji, we have only one Drua. So in 3 to 5 years, so you turn back the clock anti-clockwise to have more than 100 Druas in Fiji water. And of course, errors for us, and on behalf of me as an executive of Drua sailing experience, and then as a representative of of people from Fiji, from the bottom of my heart, I extend our sincere acknowledgement to the people of the university. They're organizing our conference for us to be here. I didn't get my visa from Fiji, but I happened to be here to get my German visa in Canada. So I took 2 countries to get my visa. But it's good to be here, and I wasn't expecting a lot of audience today, but from us, thank you very much to be here supporting us, and we can go home proud, thinking that there's a lot of people in Berlin supporting us and behind us for what we're doing. And so yeah, Malovo Levu, thank you very much. Thank you. Time for questions. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, sweet. All good.
Mic's on? Good now? Yeah. One word about protocol. We are recording the entire conference because there is a Zoom event running parallel to this. I don't know how many people have joined us on Zoom, but there was a lot of interest in Oceania. The time difference is quite brutal, but there are people out there. This means we take questions both from people who have joined on Zoom and questions from people in the audience. Everybody would have to use a microphone when they speak, so the sound goes into the Zoom conference and people who are not in the room can also hear and follow. This being said, we have created the conference to have ample space for discussion, also amongst the delegates who have come over from Oceania, who have had a chance to chat over so many things that happened over the past 2 or 3 days, but who come from very different parts of Oceania and haven't had a chance to exchange their knowledges and their ideas, at least in that large group before. So we tend to privilege voices also from within the delegation before we open out to the audience. Any response to Seta's amazing presentation? Yes, then we go here first.
Hello, Seta. Thank you for this. I'm Janusz Ostrowski. Maybe you remember me. I'm just wanted to ask you about the once over time a project of building a bigger proa, a bigger drua. 2 years ago, there were plans when just the COVID came. You've got the idea with Peter to build a bigger one. Is there a chance that it will revive so you can have a even bigger vessel instead of having a 100 of the same ones, to have a bigger one and then maybe more of bigger ones?
Yeah, it's great to finally meet you. And yes, and we have a pilot project, and we're in Fiji, where we have our project was to build a bigger drua, and because of the outer island, it took them a long time to get to the main island of Fiji. So what we're hoping to build a mothership, build druas that can go 2 or 3 times a month and just sail. And also all these little druas from this island, they can bring their cargo to the mothership, and they exchange, and the mothership can bring the cargo to Suva to do the exchange. So that's the pilot project, and that's where Peter and I, were looking for your assistance. We can come up with what could be the best design that can be used to build this bigger drua that can carry cargo and passengers through the outer island in Fiji. But it's still in part of a plan to build big druas, and of course, we also to strengthen our ties to our neighboring country, by sailing big tours and goes to, instead of flying over, we can take delegates from, we take these big tours, a big sailing canoe. We can go to, for example, I can go to PNG, pick up Sana. I said, Sana, get ready. We're going to Berlin. So I pick up Sana, and then I go to another island. I pick the delegates, and just sail it to a conference. In a way, we can all meet each other during the voyage, and we can come up with all these crazy ideas. That's also part of the plan, and that's the plan. It's still part of the plan, but unfortunately, we're still looking for funding to build that big tour, but it's still part of the plan.
Look forward to you sailing down the River Spree to here. There's one question here in the back.
Nisambula Setareki Binaka Vakalebu. For that really wonderful presentation, Binaka Vakalebu. I have a question. Why was Ledua a point? Because there's also tourism on Ledua. And is tourism maybe, or ecotourism, a way to also find funding for navigation schools?
Why your question is why Ledua?
Yes, why was you said that that was like Ledua is a very central point in the station.
Not Ledua. It's the island, the big island next to Ledua. It's called Ovalau.
Yes.
So Ovalau was.
It's Levuka.
Yeah, Levuka.
Okay, then that was just okay.
So Levuka was the oldest, the old capital of Fiji.
Yeah, I know.
And because of this, how these little trade winds, they come through that route and stop in Levuka to restock before they sail across to the other side of the country.
But then my second question would nevertheless be, with all that tourism that Fiji is getting, and that is partly not sustainable, but would ecotourism maybe be also a way to find financing for navigation schools?
Yeah, that's part of the idea. In Fiji, the tour sailing experience is a part of. It's called Nduavata. So Nduavata means it's like a collective organization that they're like-minded. They intend to revitalize the tradition and the culture in Fiji. So we, as a tour experience, we're part of the ecotourism small business operators. And but as of me, I kind of like drift away from being in the tourism industry because I want to more focus on educational and then and revitalizing traditional canoe building and sailing in Fiji. That's why kind of like I drifted aside from being a tourist operators. Thank you.
Helen's,
oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
Go first.
The way I didn't know what was going on. I'm so sorry. Do I need to introduce myself first?
Yeah, say who you are.
Okay.
That'd be nice.
I'm being manually adjusted. I'm so sorry. Hello, I'm Lorna. I'm from the United States. I'm a grad student. I don't know how much information I'm supposed to give. Hi, more of a political question. I know Fiji just had a government turnover as of December from the military coup leader. He's no longer in power. I don't know if you keep up with the elections, but I know she mentioned the finances, and I know that you are looking for financial backing. I don't know whether you actually get any financial backing from your government at all, or if you operate strictly as a private enterprise. But if you do get anything in terms of like government grants or government funding, like say you get it from the tourism sector, does getting a new government, no longer from that military coup leader, does that look promising going forward, that you might have that as a new route for financial funding? Or is that more of a, not gonna touch that, gonna see what the next few years look like first, since this did just happen in the last 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy you brought that questions up. Maybe you can turn the camera off, so I,
No.
But anyway, for the last few years, they've been operating we wrote to the government, we put our proposal, we're going into the ministry and, knocking on the doors and asking for, even the COP23 champions. This could be the solution to, to campaign against climate change by building more traditional canoe. It happened to be, maybe we're knocking on the wrong door, or maybe we're just yelling at the of their deaf ears, but the government was our first priority for us to go to the government singing for funding, but for the last government, it never happened. So we, with this new government, it is look promising for us, because of all the ministers that they are intent to bring the climate change as one of their priorities in today's. So it does look promising for us, and that's what we're thinking of. With partnership with our universities, one for the university, I think it's going to make us, it's going to create at least a depth of us looking for funding into the government. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious about the rudder. I saw that your rudder is tied to the vessel, and in old time the rudder was loose, and I was told they need 2 men to stand on the rudder blade only to press it under the water. And I think they had good reason not to tie the rudder with the vessel. And you have another principle in your mind, that you tied the rudder with the vessel. And I wonder what made you change this principle?
So for us, it's an up and down steering system. So it's only take 2 men because it's a big draw. But for us, because we tied a rope to the rudder to stop from running away. But actually, for us, it's just up and down motions. So when you push down the rudder, when you push it down, the blade comes out of the water. The sailing canoe will react. It's always going to come into the wind. Every sailing vessel is always going to come into the wind without any rudder, without any centerboard. So that's why we, if you pull it up, so the blade goes into the water, it's always going to come downwind. So if it's for us, I find it really easy to steer on our drawer, and then Mimi and Luke, will also tell you, because they also have a little taste of how to steer a drawer. So it's up and down motions. So you don't have to go from side to side. It's just like pushing down, pulling forward. So, and sometimes, with the good winds, when I took the drawer out for sailing, sometimes I set it out on autopilot, and when just sitting there and just make sure I stay on course. So yeah, it's just up and down motions.
Welcome, Cynthia.
Bulavanaka Setareki. I just thought I would mention, because we're sitting here in Germany, that Germany has decided to open an embassy in Suva. And maybe that's something for the future, because Germany talks a lot about geopolitical and environmental issues. So maybe that's going to be a good address for funding for the future.
I think that's a good idea. Well, we're going to take our proposals next time I get back to this. Look for the Germany.
Will you be able to help? Will you be able to help? You're connected.
Thank you.
More questions?
Good morning. My name is Mark Weiss. I'm from Bremen. I'm an industrial engineer for maritime transport. So I studied nautical science in Bremen. My question is regarding now, as you mentioned, you are developing or have already created a navigation school. So do you teach the ancient knowledge, or have you developed further navigation methods as well in with respect to the climate change? If we think about winds, maybe there are different, or to the increased sea temperature with difference then to sea currents. How's there your attempt for navigation as future generations, navigation sailors?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I mean, for us, you know, we're not creating anything new into our navigation system. It's what we wanted to do is that we wanted to bring back that knowledge, and even the science can't explain that knowledge, but it's really deep. And we don't intend to create anything. So what we wanted to do is that we wanted to bring back everything that we can get from how our ancestors sailed before, and revive that knowledge in a way that we can counter, you know, the fight against climate change. You know, we face, even for me in Fiji, you know, I did my own observation on you know, on the current weather forecast situation in Fiji. So what I did is, because you know, I go into this app to tell you the weather for the next few days. So I'll compare all the models, and then I just sit there and watch, you know, what's happening in the Fiji weather. And it's changed dramatically, but you know, it's climate change due to climate change. But and then you know, it's the prediction, because you know what I learned, at least a fraction of you know, of the people of you know, of our cousins from Micronesia, from Maupialang to one. You know, my instructors was one of his students from New Zealand, and of course, you know, I learned a little bit under Naino Thompson, you know, but that's, you know, that's the knowledge you know, I have. It comes from Satawal, because you know, my because I was still away for the 2 years voyage when my grandmother passed away, when my grandfather passed away. So and I wanted, you know, with you know, hoping for my dad will share all his knowledge of, because he's, you know, he sailed around the island in the Lau group, you know, to bring back that knowledge. But you know, we're not hope, you know, we you know, we hoping to implement maybe a little, you know, a little few things it can help with revitalizing traditional knowledge. But no, we're not wanted to change anything from what has been there before. So, yeah.
Thanks, Seta. We have comments coming in from somewhere in the Zoom. Just as a reminder for those people calling in, it'd be nice to know where you're calling in from and who you are. If you introduced yourself before, or if we read out who you are, so we know what's happening.
Okay, so we have a Zoom question from Lara Hafner, who is a philosopher telling the histories of thought of island worlds. And the question is, in regard to the last question, has there been any attempts to write about the experiences, texts, or other material like film that can be shared with students? And thank you so much for this inspiring and motivating talk.
Yeah. So thank you for the question. So for us, you know, when we have the grant from IUCN, we have to develop you know, a training manual for our training program. You know, we actually start from scratch, you know, because you know, because none of our history was written. It's all been passed down, you know. But we managed to collect all the basic stuff from our, you know, from traditional canoe building, by asking, you know, with old people that still have the knowledge of traditional canoe building and sailing. But in 2009, In 2012, we sailed down to the Lau and do a research on traditional canoe building and navigations. And and we also did a head count, and we happened to have only 28 old people. That's in 2012. We happened to count only 28 people across the Lau that still have the knowledge of building traditional canoe. So that's in 2012, and more than 50% of the 28 have passed on. It's only left with only a few. And so yeah, we documented our research, and we try and write up and put up PowerPoint presentation from what we from the research that we gather, that we can put together and create a training manual for the children's in Fiji, and then that's what we started. But at the moment, we created our more than 20 pages basic training manual for kids, but it's all about basics about traditional canoe building and tying knots and basics about traditional navigations.
One more.
Okay. Yeah, so we have another question, and it will be displayed. Thank you very much. From Tanya Valentras, James Cook University, Samoan born and raised, Talofa Balovinaka, in the building of the Va. May I ask how much mythology and story was incorporated? Was there also music, performance, or ceremony in the building process? Pa'awhetai, thank you.
Cool. So for us, one of the reasons why we lost, the building of traditional canoe building, because when the Methodists came into Fiji, they saw, because during a process of building a traditional canoe, we have to kill someone. It's a sacrificial practice. Even if if we have to go up and cut a log, we have to it's a protocol to kill someone as a sacrificial practice before we even cut down the trees. And so when the Methodists came into Fiji, they saw there was a massive killing of people only for the purpose of building one rua. It's a belief that to drive away the black clouds, the evil spirits that want to involve with the building of canoe. So there's a lot of there's chant and there's singing practice. They're involved with the building of druas. If you've seen the first video, it takes a whole community to build a drua. But and of course, the women was the main engineer, because they weave the sails that are used to propel the drua back in the olden days. So the women play the important role in the building industry because they are the engineer. There's a lot of chant, and our brothers from the neighboring country, will tell you more about this. There's a lot of chants and sitting and practice that are involved with the building of traditional canoe. And it's for us, even though and some of I remember when my grandfather was building his Taumako for the racing in the last 10 years, last 6 to 8 years. I remember then, he's sitting there beside his canoe, carving and singing. And I was fortunate just to spend at least a day before, I sail out again out of Fiji. And I was there, and I was just, he was sitting there with my brother, carving their canoe and singing. This is also what we were hoping to revitalize, to bring back these old people. And then the language, the dialect they use even in maintaining the drua, that were also what we wanted to capture, because the dialect, it's not a normal dialect that you speak every day. It's a different dialect that you use involve even maintaining a drua and even building the drua and all this little detail about what we wanted to try and capture. And that's what we're hoping to do by year. So it's that, it's still practice the chant, the singing, and everything that's involved with the building of a traditional canoe.
Thank you, Seta. There's one more by Cynthia. Can you stop? We need the mic.
Thanks. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Cynthia Bede, and I was filming in Fiji most of last year. I know Joji quite well, so he was talking to me about the felling of the trees for the druas, and I just wanted to ask, have you ever participated in that, the choosing of the particular tree and the ceremonies that accompany the cutting of the trees, or is that done only by a particular group of people?
It's because the thing is, because when we have to go into the bush to cut the trees, only men and youth they goes in, because once they cut the tree, they're gonna have to shape it and make get rid of the heavy stuff before they drag it to the shore. But I happen to be in Fiji with my old men, and when they were building 3 traditional Taumako for the canoe race, so they want to film them going up into the bush and choose which tree, and the Pacific Blue Foundations was looking for a volunteer to help them with set up their cameras, and I happened to be there at that time, so I volunteered to be to tag along and experience what it's like to choose to go in and choose the trees that appropriate for that canoe. And so we filmed that day took us almost over half a day. So we just went into the bush, and they have to choose 3 big there was we choose they built the canoe out of mahogany tree. So I was there, and I was part of the filming crew that filmed them choosing the tree they wanted to build for their canoe. So yeah, I have not much experience, but a little experience of choosing trees to be cut for building.
Great. So the film material exists.
It's exists, but I think it's with the Pacific Blue Foundation, which is another organization that was involved with the canoe racing in Fiji.
Okay, thank you.
Hermann Mückler, University of Vienna, Austria. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. You are coming from the east of Fiji, from the Lao group, and there is a lot of Tongan influence there, at least also in the past and so. And the Fijian Drua and the Tongan Kalia, they look quite similar. And you even showed us an image of a Samoan ali, which was made for the Kaiser, as you said here. So there are quite some similarities between Fijian and Samoan and Tongan.
Yeah. So
double hull boat with this asymmetric hull and so. But maybe you can mention, or maybe you can distinct the Fijian Drua from a Tongan Kalia. Are there specific elements which you can only find on a Fijian Drua?
Yeah. So I walked into the other part of the museum the other day, and then I just walked in and see 3 Drua, and they marked it, and they put a question mark on it. It's a Samoa Alia, but they put a question mark on it. And then I have a look at it, and it's like, no, this is not a Fijian Drua. But when I looked at the other one, I said, oh yeah, this is a Fijian Drua. When I look at the other one, I said, no, this is not Alia, this is not a Drua. So it left with one. It's a Kalia from Tonga. So there's that's for me, I can differentiate by the design of of where the Drua was built, whether it was built from Samoa, Tonga, or Fiji, by just looking at some of the fixtures they use in the building of the Drua. But they're quite similar. But yeah, so the Drua is actually the evidence of the amazing relationship between the Central Oceania. Even us, We have our sail design. Even today, we're still debating where did we get the sail designs from, because the same sail design is used by our cousins from the Micronesia. So it's still a debate whether the design was coming from them or whether it was coming from us. So that's the similarities, and that's evidence of the relationship between us and the people around the Pacific. So it's still a debate, but that's the evidence of the relationship that we had back in the day. So yeah.
Right, if there are no more urgent questions, please give a hand to Setareki Ledua.
Thank you.
And we will continue at 2 o'clock with the section on Taumako. I have to apologize for us not being able to feed everyone who is here at the conference. You may imagine that our top priority was to bring as many people as possible from Oceania to Berlin to be able to connect